Okay, great. Welcome to the third roundtable of the SAFER project. I'm Nico Zeg, one of the co-PIs on the project. And today we're going to explore tools and frameworks for flood resilience planning. And before I introduce our guest speakers, I wanted to start by reintroducing Emily Bodecker of Momentum Consulting, who is the facilitator on this project. And you'll hear from her after this introduction. I'm super excited to introduce Dr. Jamie Shinn and Dr. Behrang Bidadian, who will be kicking off this roundtable by sharing their work on the West Virginia Flood Resiliency Framework. Dr. Shinn is assistant professor in the Department of Environmental Sciences at SUNY, College of Environmental Science and Forestry, and her research and teaching broadly focus on the relationships between humans and the environment by examining climate adaptation, environmental governance, and disaster response and recovery, with a specific focus on questions related to sources of social and ecological vulnerability, but also the potential for transformation that can lead to a more just and equitable climate futures. She works across a diverse community of practice, including academicians, nonprofits, government, community, faith-based groups, and first responders. And she has experience with this work in Central Appalachia, the Northeastern United States, Puerto Rico, Botswana, and Namibia in Southern Africa. And her current projects really reflect this comprehensive perspective on climate adaptation. And these projects include flood vulnerability and resilience in Central Appalachia, transformation and just energy transitions, environmental governance of environments in Southern Africa, and transformation and international climate adaptation finance. As a colleague that I also get to call Jamie a friend, she's played a key role in helping me reshape my own research program by challenging notions of power and expertise, storytelling, community, and hope. And you may have seen a QR code in a paper of Jamie's that was cycling in the introduction slides. It's titled, "If it wasn't for faith-based groups, we wouldn't be where we are today." And this paper explored the response of the 2016 floods here in West Virginia. And it's a really profound paper because it provides a powerful and palpable example of hope and solidarity at the community scale, and how different types of communities come together in disaster, and the importance of social capital for community resilience. And so this paper is definitely a worthwhile read if you're engaging with communities, but also seeking examples of hope to sustain your own work around these challenges amongst the climate crisis. And then Dr. Bidadian is a GIS analyst with the West Virginia GIS Tech Center in the Department of Geology and Geography at West Virginia University. He applies geospatial and machine learning tools combined with unique perspectives, with a background in architectural engineering, planning, geological sciences, human and community development, to explore questions around flood disaster risk assessment, social vulnerability, and environmental equity. I also want to mention that he's a certified floodplain manager, which is very impressive. And I think that brings a very unique insight to the research around disaster planning and preparation. In addition to his current work on flooding in West Virginia and the development of the framework we'll hear about today, he has studied the distribution of flood exposure, risk, and vulnerability in urban areas, and the role that redlining plays in flood risks and impact that were related to Hurricane Harvey that hit Houston in 2018. And so really excited for you all to join us. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks, Nico, for that really lovely introduction. Nico and I have been in conversation about these topics for a long time, and so it's fun to engage in this new way. And thanks to the SAFER Apps team for the invite for us to share a bit about our project, and for you all for joining us today. So Behrang and I have a lot to say about this project, and we are not going to even skim the surface. What we really want to focus on is the process that we've gone through here in ways that we hope it will resonate and potentially be helpful for this community. But we're both available to answer questions after this, and we'll have our emails available and all of that. So we've been working on this project called the West Virginia Flood Resiliency Framework now since 2022, and it's been a part of an NSF Civic Award that I'll talk about really briefly, that has had two stages, a planning grant, or what we call stage 1, and then a full award stage 2, which we're just getting toward the end of now. So that's what I want to walk you through, both what we've done, but also how we've gotten there. So I just want to provide some context for you before we get started. Let's see if I can get this to play. So what you're seeing on the screen here is drone footage of Raynell, West Virginia, and Greenbrier County on June 24th, 2016, the day after a massive flood swept across huge parts of the state. I had just moved to West Virginia. I was on the faculty at West Virginia University for a long time before I moved to SUNY ESF. And in 2017, a colleague and I, who I published that paper with that you saw at the beginning, and I began to do some research around what were the long-term impacts of this flood in terms of community response and recovery. And that sparked all sorts of ideas that have evolved over time into the project that I'll talk about today. But I just wanted to tell you that this is kind of the origin story for me. This is the biggest flood in recent history in West Virginia, but by far not the only. And if you follow this kind of thing in the news, you'll know that McDowell and Mingo County in West Virginia have been very hard hit by floods just in recent weeks. So this is a common phenomenon in the state. And somewhat surprisingly to people, West Virginia is actually ranked nationally at or near the top of many flood risk categories in the country. And so we expect these kind of events, unfortunately, to continue to happen. So I had been working, as I said, for a number of years on this, and then the National Science Foundation put out a call for their Civic Innovation Challenge. And the Civic program is very unique within the NSF portfolio. What it does is it is designed to support research teams that include academics and civic actors. And it really flips the normal dynamic of researchers coming in and saying, here's your problem, let us fix it for you, let us research it. Rather, it supports work that goes in and asks communities to themselves define what their priorities are for research-based issues. And so because of the team I had been working with already, I felt that we were well primed for this. And we did get both the stage 1 and the full award. And so this is a really interesting program. If you're operating in this space as an academic or a practitioner, I encourage you to look into it. And I'm happy to chat more about it. And so through the Civic, we assembled this team, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this team, both because I'm indebted to these people for the amount of time and effort they've put into this project, but also because if you take away anything from us today, I want it to be that building and strengthening networks is critical to the type of work that I think we're all talking about here. And our team is in of itself representative of the network that we work with. And I think that's what has allowed us to be successful to the extent that we have been. So we have academic folks, myself and my colleague, Aaron Maxwell at WVU. We have Behrang and his colleagues at the West Virginia GIS Technical Center that's also housed at WVU. But we also have lawyers on our team. We have the director and deputy director of the State Resiliency Office for West Virginia on our team. So we have a state agency represented. We have representatives of faith-based organizations that are critical in disaster response in many cases, including West Virginia, emergency management, and we have local people who have just been instrumental within their communities on this topic. And it's been through this combined and collective effort of co-creation of the research project that I think this has really worked. And I just want to say that this is not the team that necessarily existed when that first proposal went in for the planning grant. This team has evolved, and one thing we used the planning grant to do was to build this team. So notably, the State Resiliency Office was not on the stage 1 project, but we got them on board and they were on the stage 2, right? And that's been really, really critical for us. So my first lesson was to build the right team during the planning grant stage. I want to talk about what we did during the planning grant to kind of show you how we got to the stage 2 full award. So together what we did was we identified this objective to go to one very specific location in West Virginia, Greenbrier County, which was particularly hard hit. That's where you saw the drone footage by that 2016 flood, to see if we could determine gaps in organizational capacity, coordination across organizations, and flood risk knowledge that could be filled to improve flood response and recovery moving forward. There had been no systematic documentation of lessons learned from the flood until our project came on board in 2022, so we thought this filled a critical gap. And we did this through a number of activities. We ran a survey of county residents. It was like hugely successful in terms of surveys. We got a 4% rate of the entire county response rate. Notably, Behrang and his team created a whole series of flood risk vulnerability maps and visualizations. And then really critically, we brought those visualizations to the communities that we were working in, both in person and virtually, and we ran a series of focus groups. And in those focus groups, we worked with community members, members of the Disaster Response and Recovery Network, everybody from local mayors all the way up to FEMA. What were the priorities that they had coming out of the 2016 flood? And what do these visualizations mean to you? What feedback do you have? We engaged them in a participatory GIS process, and Behrang and his team then went back and fine-tuned the visualizations accordingly. Nothing we found surprised us. We confirmed our hypotheses that West Virginians are impacted by floods and not adequately prepared for them. There's a lack of resources to support pre-disaster coordination, and there's a need for increased capacity in several areas and a need for increased flood risk knowledge. The outcomes of stage one were that we kind of created these visualizations and gave them back to the communities. And we also created a project report that had a series of very specific project recommendations targeted at particular scales and stakeholders. And we disseminated these back to the communities through a series of meetings, and they're available online. And so, just the planning grant itself had some outcomes for the communities in which we were working. For us, of course, the most important outcome is that we were given the Stage 2 award by the NSF. This was a much larger award that began in 2023, and we're kind of in the final stages now of wrapping it up. And that was to build this framework. A lot went into building the framework. I don't have nearly enough time to tell you about all of these things today, but I do want to focus on one thing, which is the symposium we hosted, which Nico was at, and to use that as a way to show you the ways in which we've been engaging with the network and community that we're interested in doing that work with. And then Behrang's going to tell you a little bit more about some of the visual tools that we've created as part of this framework too. We think this framework is unique in the nation. We don't think anything exists like it for other states, and we'd be happy to talk about why we think that's true and all of that in the breakout sessions if that's of interest. So this symposium happened just about a year ago in Charleston, the capital of West Virginia. And for 2 days, we pulled together 120 folks who were part of the Response and Recovery Network. So kind of similar to those focus groups, everybody from local leaders, community members, all the way up to FEMA, NFIP, Red Cross, faith-based organizations from a variety of regional and national organizations. And we worked to figure out what are the common understandings we can come to about who the main players are in a disaster? What are their capabilities? How can they coordinate? What are the barriers to those coordinations? And also kind of considerations for resiliency broadly. It looked like this. We sat at round tables in a convention center. We had an external facilitator come and do disaster scenario planning with us. We did panels and breakout sessions. There were a lot of Post-it notes. And we had informal time also for networking. And at the end of those 2 days, we surveyed all of the attendees. And for me, most notably, what came out of that is that over a third of the folks who came said that they met and connected to 10 or more individuals that they hadn't known previously. And this is critical for me because it shows that we're doing the work of improving this network, right? With the assumption that in better network leads to better coordination and better response. Also, we were able to use the connections that we built at the symposium to co-create with folks who were part of this network, this best practices guide. Now, I know not everybody here is interested in disasters, but if you are and you want to see this best practices guide, it's tailored to be specific to West Virginia, but it could resonate with communities. I've already shared it with folks in Asheville, North Carolina, for instance, in the post-Helene context. This is available on the website, but it's also a PDF that I'd be happy to email to you, and you can kind of see the table of contents there. Okay, so what are my takeaways here? Community engagement is so important, and I think we know that. But what for me this project has really brought to bear is really thinking through who that community is. I'm a social scientist. I'm used to going into communities in a geographic location and sitting at kitchen tables and libraries and community halls to talk to people. But the symposium really showed me that we need to think hard about what we're counting as a community here and work to identify who needs to be at the table and then get them to that table, right? And I can talk about the ways in which we tried to facilitate people coming to that table at the symposium. We had monetary help and all of these things to make sure that anyone who could be there was there. And so really thinking about what you mean by community and how you're engaging. And then working in partnership to identify and achieve common goals. If you go back to that picture I showed you of our team, we don't all have the exact same goals, right? The State Resiliency Office doesn't have the same goals as me, doesn't have the same goals as the emergency management folks. But we all had a common goal around community flood resiliency. And by identifying that and working on that together, we were able to use it as an anchor to the whole project. And I think no matter what work we're doing in this space, that if we're building and strengthening these networks, we're working to increase resilience. And so that's kind of my parting words, but I think also what we'll talk about in the breakout room that I'll go to. And so I hope other folks want to kind of continue to engage in that conversation. We have a project website, but the framework itself is live and explorable. It is still in its beta version. There are some components that are not done, but by and large, it is done. And that's my email. So I look forward to talking to folks more. And then let me hand it over to Behrang to tell you a little bit more about our tool itself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Behrang. I'm happy to be on this meeting today and talk about the process of development of the tools under the WVFRF, specifically the West Virginia Risk Explorer tools. But first, I'm going to talk about a few basic concepts related to the tools. So West Virginia is a state facing severe and frequent flood disasters. Since 1953, we have had 64 federally declared flood disasters in the state, causing 220 loss of lives. The bottom row shows some pictures of the flood which occurred a month ago in the state. So after these disasters, there's usually an increased awareness about the risk, but it may fade away after some while. So by pre-disaster planning on sunny days, we should try to keep that awareness alive. And the planning process includes risk assessment as the very first step. So first, we should understand the risk. We should know its extent and its hotspots. Then we should communicate the risk with the communities, with the public, and then we can get ready for mitigation efforts. And all of these steps should be localized to the specific location. So, I mean, location matters in pre-disaster planning. A solution for West Virginia is not necessarily applicable to Texas, for example. But what do we mean by risk? So risk associates with potential losses, and it has three main components of hazard, which is flooding in this case, and exposure, which includes population and assets prone to the hazard, and vulnerability of those exposed elements. So some people are more vulnerable to disasters. Some structures are more vulnerable to flooding. So all of these three elements are important while defining the risk. So for our risk assessment process, we have been using FEMA's firm maps as the hazard source. So that's not our, I mean, hazard mapping is not the focus of our work. But for exposure assessment, we have had a fund from FEMA and the state for hazard mitigation. We use that to develop the floodplain building inventory in West Virginia. We identified all the primary structures, I mean, insurable structures within the 100-year floodplain in the state, in addition to the community assets, both historical and non-historical, and also essential facilities. By essential facilities, I mean 911 centers, fire and police departments, hospitals, nursing homes, and schools. So we identified those in the both 100 and 500-year floodplains. And the building identification process is mostly like a manual GIS process, but we use our programmed script to extract detailed building characteristics from tax assessment data for each building. And also we have calculated the number of people displaced from each residential building in case of a 100-year flood. And the results are available on the WVA flood tool, which is a popular tool in the state, I think. So it's an interactive website. The users can click on each building, see the detailed building characteristics of the structures in floodplain, and also can see the damage estimations, the depth values, and so on. For vulnerability assessment, as part of the WVFRF, we developed the West Virginia Social Vulnerability Index. We tried to make it so localized. So we just use these 8 indicators of social vulnerability because we thought these were more applicable to West Virginia or more critical in West Virginia. So we developed that index under those different scales from communities, including both incorporated places and unincorporated areas, to counties, and also the planning and development regions. Then we aggregated the building level data we had under the West Virginia Flood Risk Index and under the risk categories. So for categories 1 to 7, we considered different indicators and combined them to develop that index for multiple scales again. And as can be seen here, some of the indicators are hazard related, specifically the ones in the first group. Many of them are exposure related. Some of them are vulnerability related. That social vulnerability index itself is an indicator within this larger index. And also we have some indicators of physical vulnerability under category 3. And we also considered some damage estimations and previous damage records as the indicators of risk, overall risk, combining all of these. Based on these, we developed certain tools under West Virginia Risk Explorer. So the first group is the building level tools. We have the primary structure tool here. So I'm showing the example of Mingo County because it was one of the counties hit by the recent flood. So here we can see all the buildings in the floodplain of Mingo County. So we have like more than 3,600 structures there. So each row shows a structure in floodplain with its detailed characteristics. And if I click on this unique building ID, we can see also those detailed information in this format, which can be printed out. And the other building level tool is the significant structure tool. So again, for Mingo County, we have 101 significant structures in floodplain under these 3 categories. So here we can see there are some utilities, schools, or churches, and some other types of significant structures. And these two tools are aggregated level tools. So this risk map summarizes the index and also individual indicators at multiple scales. So if I click on Mingo County here, so we can see this county is at a very high risk of flooding. It's the 5th in the state. And these are like detailed indicators for which this county is at higher risk. And also, the risk report tool shows a more detailed display of those indicators. So we can see them in different categories, and also comparison of those for this county with the statewide statistics of the other counties. We have also developed some dashboards. So different risk dashboards, fatality dashboards. I can show just one of them. This is a risk dashboard at the county level. If I click on Mingo County again, it shows the statistics for that county. And this hazard library is like a huge archive of all the documents, data, and products we produced or we gathered for flood risk. So here is a list for Mingo County. The users can click on these, download the documents, and use them for different purposes. So as I said, risk communication is an important stage of the process, but we should decide who should be the target. And we have thought about these stakeholder groups. As you can see, these may be from different backgrounds and different expertise. So we designed the risk communication tools, specifically visualization tools. So the first group is the 3D movies, which are animations of flood scenarios, and also view sheds, which are the bird's eye views, images of the scenarios, and building level profiles. I can show you one of them quickly. So these are like the scenarios at the building level, specific buildings.
This transition, Behrang.
Yeah, we have been also working on some mitigation tools. And yeah, that was a brief introduction of the tools and the process. You can use the links to explore the tools. Thank you.
So I will close by saying that we will have 2 more roundtables in this spring, one in April and one in May. And over the next few weeks, we'll be getting out a flyer and invitations for you all to join us. We really appreciate your participation today. Thanks very much.